There we go. And I'm just going to give it another minute for others to sign on. We have 15 people. So, good morning to those of you that are on. The recording has already started. So, we're just going to give it like a one more minute, for anyone else who's signing on this morning to get onto the Zoom. And I did change, not change, but I added something right in the beginning, which is kind of more of like a reminder for all of us or some information that you didn't know. I had the pleasure of rereading the Truth in Renting book to look for something. And that is an education in and of itself. So, something you should consider doing because there is so much information on there, right? A lot of this is basic, but if you get into situations that are more difficult, that's when it starts. It really gets very leveled and, answers to a lot of questions in there. So, okay, it's 9:32. We're starting. Good morning. So, welcome to the Rental Compliance Mastery. We are trying to give you again an overview of the importance of the things that are necessary to do and not to do when you are doing your rentals. In New Jersey and in some of our offices, they have become prominent issues that are definitely worth every single agent who does even one rental paying attention to this. Okay. So the first thing that I've added is some true or false. And I'm not asking you to answer these questions. And some of them are very simple. One is like a reminder of a necessary thing you need to do. But the Truth in Renting book in dot loop must be signed on the last page by landlords as well as tenants. And the answer to that is true. That book is in both of our dot loop files, in the landlord file and also in the tenant file. So please remember not to create your own loops when you're doing dot loop for rentals or any other property. Our loops are set up that the required documents are noted and are really important that they're in there. Next, you may have a landlord question you about evictions if they need to evict someone. Causes for eviction are listed in the Truth in Renting booklet. Some I've listed here, but that is not all of them. There are a lot of reasons. Failure to pay rent, disorderly conduct, damage or destruction to property, substantial violation of breach of the landlord's rules and regulations, violations of breach of covenants and agreements contained in the lease, failure to pay rent increase, health and safety violation or removal from the rental market. The landlord wants to permanently retire the property from residential use and refusal to accept reasonable changes in the terms and conditions of the lease. That is just a short list. There's probably an equal longer list with explanations for each category in the Truth in Renting book. So if you come across this, you might want to consult the book or reference, really give your landlord again as a refresher, the Truth in Renting book, so that they will know how to handle these situations and what they can evict people for. There are, not too often will they ask you. They just, take upon themselves to do the eviction, but there's a lot of reasons in there. So you want to be their source for getting the starting point for the information. Next, within 30 days after the termination of a tenancy, a landlord must return the security deposit plus interest earned less deductions to the tenant. Deductions may include the cost of any damages over and above normal wear and tear and any other money due the landlord under the terms of the lease. The landlord must return the money either by personal delivery, registered or certified mail. If there are any deductions made from security deposit by the landlord, an itemized list of these deductions must also be sent to the tenant by registered or certified mail within 30 days from the termination of the lease. Now, I remembered that you have to, list the deductions, but myself was not really, key to the fact that it has to be sent by certified mail within 30 days. Okay, so you want to make sure the landlord is following the procedures, and you might want to give them the booklet again as a reminder, print it out for them or email it to them. And one of the other things about our system with Loop is when you send that booklet and they sign it, we also have an activity log in Loop. So they cannot blame you for not providing the information. The activity log will say that you emailed that booklet on the day that you emailed that to them and they signed it. So Loop really is also there to protect you. Okay, next, a lot of stuff is going on with fair housing. There are testers out there in the market, really hitting close to home in our company. You want to be prepared for that. So this is like a reminder. The Federal Fair Housing Act protects home buyers from discrimination as they get home buyers or tenants as they get a mortgage, rent a home, buy a home, seeking housing assistance, or participate in other house-related activities. The Fair Housing Act prevents discrimination based on race, color, sex, national origin, religion, disability, or familial status. So that is the federal fair housing, okay, law. To sum it up, you don't want to be caught discriminating against any of those issues. In 2020, the NAR Code of Ethics took us a little bit higher in our standards to maintain that we as realtors have a higher standard and need to be careful in any posting, social media, any discriminatory speech for any reason against anyone in our real estate practices. So you really want to be careful when you're making your post on Facebook. Please remember Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they're all social networks. And once it's out on the social network, it's out there. It's not easy to take away. So you don't want to be caught making derogatory speech against anyone because as a realtor, you know better. Okay. We did the federal fair housing. And in New Jersey, they kind of take it another step, right? There are legally protected classes. You cannot, I'm going to get into those in a second, but here you do not want to set different terms for any of these classes. You want to make sure that you're treating everyone fairly in a rental. You're requiring a credit report, employment verification, anything you're requiring from one tenant, you're requiring from all tenants. You cannot discriminate because of the source. As long as it is a source of legal income, you cannot discriminate against the source where the money is coming from. If they can prove that they have the money, you cannot falsely deny housing or that they can't inspect a property for sale or rental to any person who is legally protected by the act. Refusal to make accommodations and rules and services for disabled person that have been deemed necessary by a physician, you cannot do that. Refusal to allow disabled person to make reasonable accommodations to his or her dwelling is another thing you cannot do. Reasonable is an operative word, and it's a word that I'm not really going to specify because that could require some extra legal guidance. And you can't interfere or try to block anyone trying to make a fair housing complaint. So next, we know the federal fair housing has the 6 classes. I'm actually not reading from the screen, but in New Jersey, it is illegal to discriminate against a prospective or current buyer or tenant because of race, creed, color, national origin, sex, gender identity or expression, marital status, civil union status, affectional or sexual orientation, familial status, pregnancy or breastfeeding, actual or perceived physical or mental disability, ancestry, nationality, domestic partner status, source of lawful income used for mortgage or rental payments, or liability for service in the armed forces of the United States. It is also illegal to place any advertisement or make any statements or utterances that express directly or indirectly any limitations to offer housing to real estate based on any of those characteristics. So this is your reference. Anyone who is on this Zoom today, please feel free to email me at movingwithfran@gmail.com, and I will send you a copy of this slideshow within the next day or two so that you can have it for your records. If you have to refer to something, use this as a reference book for your business and how to handle these situations. There are so many different things that come up with the landlords, and they must provide reasonable accommodations. I'm not going to read through all of this for disabled tenants, but you will have this. There are some examples, and it talks about in New Jersey, it is illegal for a landlord to refuse to make a reasonable accommodation. What's reasonable? That you may need to get additional consultation with an attorney over. I'm not an attorney, you're not an attorney. If they wanted to make sure a handrail was installed because there's not one there, that I would deem as a very reasonable request for someone. I myself, not a disabled person, but I cannot do steps without a handrail. So it's not only common sense, that one, but it could reflect badly on the landlord if they refuse to do that, and on you. And it's your job to work through these situations with them or to refer them to legal counsel to get better information. There are some examples here on this page, so when you get it, you can also review those situations, but that is not the limit. There are so many situations that come up with disability or making adjustments in a rental property. There are so many things that come up. And to top it off, there are a ton of testers out there. You cannot answer one phone call, and just because somebody leaves you a message saying that they're Section 8, not return that phone call, because if they are testing on two sides of the fence there, you're going to get nabbed, and you're going to get a violation for fair housing and for discrimination. Okay. The next slide talks about Fair Haven. It's a fair housing simulation, and it's offered by the NAR. I do believe it's free, although I took it a while ago, so I'm not sure. This is an excellent, virtual class that you can do, and you have to answer the questions. And sometimes you don't really realize what you're saying. It's just inherent in your lifestyle, but you have to be very careful because, again, we are the experts, we are the professionals, we are the ones who need to pay attention to this. Bias override, overcoming barriers to fair housing. That is another class that is offered from NAR. And I've done both of these. They are both really great situations. Bias override really talks about some of the biases you may have in your mind that you don't even realize you have, depending on how you grew up, what your influences were. It's a lot of different stuff. Mainly for me, I think it brings attention to those things that are really important in making sure you don't cross the boundary line with. All right. The next is a course At Home with Diversity, which is also an excellent course offered by NAR. I think that this is definitely worth it. You have to be comfortable with what you're doing. You get a certification for taking this class, and it's definitely worth having those reminders. Now we're going to move on to some of the practical stuff, right? So the lead-based certification is different than having a lead paint inspection. And in the contract, you need to have your lead-based, landlord is responsible for doing a lead-based paint certification, and the disclosure, it also has to be disclosed in the sale in a lease. The lead paint disclosure needs to be completed, as we all know, for any properties built before 1978. So in .loop, it says, it doesn't say required because it's not required on all properties. It's only required on those that are built prior to 1978. And that is an $11,000 fine, okay? Now, I just want to bring your attention to the lead-based paint disclosure because so many of you miss, or the party who's doing the other side of the transaction miss. It must be completed. You must do A, B, C, and have the landlord sign, and you must sign. The tenant must sign A and B, and then they must sign, and the tenant's agent must sign. In order to have a fully executed lead-based paint disclosure, you need to make sure all of those things are checked off. Yeah, they either have to mark in part A, either known or unknown, part B. It's your responsibility to make sure it's filled out right. I believe it is a $2,000 fine per missing item and a total of an $11,000 fine if it is not completed. All rental dwelling units built prior to 1978 must comply with the law, which was effective July 22nd. A lead-based paint certification is required upon tenant turnover. The method of inspection for each municipality is available below. And the next slide, another reason to keep this is that it has the links for finding out what's required in the municipality so you can advise your landlord, and also make it easy for you to locate this information. It's all in this. This is not perfect. This is not everything, but I think it certainly can serve as a good source for getting the information that you need to give to your landlords, and so on and so forth. And again, the certification is different than a lead-based paint inspection. They do not need a lead-based paint inspection, but they need a certification. And some towns do it with their CO. So here is the link for the information regarding the lead-based paint. And then below that is the link, the municipal listing visual and dust wipe inspection. Depending on the amount of lead infiltration reports that we reported to the town and county through the health department, that will depend on whether you need a visual inspection or a dust wipe inspection. If there are higher concentrations of lead in one town and not in another, you may need a dust wipe inspection in one town and a visual inspection in another. Okay. I need to take a little breath there. Okay. So moving forward, in your residential lease, it talks about the lead-based paint in there. So it's also an acknowledgement that you're giving then the booklet, the pamphlet, and that is now evidence because you're getting them to sign off on that in .loop. Okay. Our system is set up to protect you wholly. All right. It's always a good thing to advise someone who's making a purchases who mentions that maybe they might decide to keep this property and then rent it in the future. You want to advise them that if they do decide to rent it, that they would be responsible for a lead-based paint certification if they decide to rent out the property. So that is in the contract, and that is on line 269, I believe, paragraph D. So when you're looking at your residential contract of sale, it is in that section there, and it talks about it. So you might want to just bring it to your purchaser's attention that should they decide to rent out the property in the future, they would be responsible for getting that lead-based certification if the house was built prior to 1978. Next is the flood risk notice landlord to tenant flood risk notice. I think everyone is doing a pretty good job on having this executed. And of course, you must complete and answer the questions when you're sending this to your client. This is a fill and sign document so that they can check off A, B, or, under number 1, they can check off which applies, number 2, which applies, number 3, which, and they can answer. So it is a fill and sign document, and then they must sign it. The landlord must sign it, and the tenant, even though you may not be representing the tenant definitely needs to sign it. You need to get the other agent to get the tenant to sign it, okay? You don't have to sign this form, but they do. Okay, again, we made .loop easy. You can go to all RE/MAX select documents for a rental listing, pick the landlord loop. Please don't make your own loops. Please do not make your own loops. Use the landlord loop. There's a Garden State landlord loop. There's a New Jersey MLS landlord loop. I think there may be a Monmouth landlord loop. This is the thing. Most of the MLSs today are not taking the documents. So if you're more comfortable and can fully execute one listing agreement under the other, it would be okay to use that. They could require it. They could require to see it. Like I know the New Jersey MLS, as long as it's an approved listing document, will take the document if they request it. Very rarely do they request the listing document, okay? They don't want you to send things into them anymore. It's like a paper, they don't need the paper anymore. It's our responsibility to make sure that you are using and completing the listing agreement, the managers I'm referencing, in order to take your listings. When you're preparing a lease, you pick the tenant loop. All the documents will be marked. Secure the flood risk notice to tenant and lead paint from the listing agent, and then have your client sign on that same form. Add them to your loop and prepare all your documents. The lead paint booklet must be provided to the landlord and tenant, and also the truth in renting book must also be provided to the landlord and tenant. It is in both loops. It needs to be signed, okay? Make sure, because your admins are going to be asking you for it. Here's a copy of, actually the lead paint booklet that is in our loop the front page is different, okay? But the last page, they do have the place way down on the bottom for the initials, and I just wanted to go over that so you could see it. And then the truth in renting book must be signed by landlord or tenant, whoever you represent. This document is in the .loop files. And here is the last page of that booklet. So they need to sign it. Okay. So to kind of start winding this down, although I have one other thing I want to go over with you. The certificate of occupancy, certificate of continued occupancy, smoke, fire inspection, landlord to tenant, flood risk notice, lead paint certification for rental units built prior to 1978, and the visual or dust wipe inside and out based on the municipality. And I put that in there inside and out because when they do come to do that lead paint certification, they are looking outside the property as well as inside the property. So you need to prepare your landlord, get it cleaned up so that the inspection can be done, okay? Once the lease is signed, the checks are issued, attorney review period is over, you are going to make sure the landlord and tenant have the contact information. At this point, you're done. You are not a property manager. You know that the landlord must deposit the security deposit. You will collect the checks and give them to the landlord, and you will collect your fee. Certified check, please. We do not take personal checks, or you will have to wait to be paid. Okay, certified bank checks for commissions on rentals, and you're not a property manager. You should not be involved in resolving any issues or acting as an intermediary between the parties and our other agent. Okay. Once they have signed everything and the lease is set to go, you are finished. You're finished. If you want, you can reiterate and give them the truth in renting book if they're experiencing issues that they signed. But for the most part, your job is done. Okay. Next, I just wanted to, now this, I did this on my phone last night because it was just the easiest way to do it for me to get the photos in. But as you all know, we have Rent Spree, okay? Rent Spree is accessible through our New Jersey hub. So once you log on to the hub and our password is select vision -26 for the hub, it is password protected now. So you need to make sure if you want to get into the hub that you have the password. Now this is on my phone. I did this, so it's going to look a little different than the screen when you're in the hub on your computer. But the point is here is the Rent Spree tile. That is the only tile that you use for Rent Spree with this company. There is in Max Center a Rent Spree tile, but that is not our company Rent Spree access. Our access is strictly on this tile right here, Rent Spree. And on the, excuse me, on the computer, this is kind of spread out. His is coming up in two lines because I was on my phone doing this and I wanted to get the photo. So Rent Spree right here, that's where you go. The next, once you're there, okay, Rent Spree is our program that we use now to certify or get your tenants to get approved or find out what their credit scores are. All the information is there. So it is up, it is running. And here, this also looks different on your screen, depending on the computer. If you are a RE/MAX Select office, you have one registration or login link. If you are in Closter, Tenafly, or Princeton, you have another link, okay, down. It's actually, they're across the page. So I apologize, I couldn't get the exact page, but yesterday when I decided to add this, I was a little bit tired after the whole day of the awards and everything, which were great. So this is going a little bit different. It appears different than it does on your computer screen. Okay. And do I have any questions out there? I have asked, whatchamacallit, I've asked, I can actually just show you. I have the New Jersey. So when you're on the New Jersey hub on your computer, this is how it looks. Okay. So just remember, do not access Rent Spree through Max Center. You access it through our New Jersey hub only. Okay. Let me stop sharing. Do we have any questions out there? Nope. Okay, I want to thank you all for participating today. There was something in the chat. Let me see what the chat says. For the lead-based paint disclosure, there is always a problem on our system. They're the boxes for waiving or testing, if not checked. If there is something we can get done regarding that. On our lead-based paint disclosure, there was always a problem with the boxes for waiving or testing. You can't waive or test.
Fran,
Yes.
what I mean is at the bottom section where the buyer or tenant is to check whether they're going to waive the lead test or
Oh, okay.
They always miss it.
So if you're representing the
that-
tenant, you can add a radio button there for them to check, or you can add a checkbox.
Do I do a checkbox? Do I add a checkbox to both things? And they
if it's
one?
not working properly, okay, that's the first time I've heard anyone say it's not working. Maybe other people have worked around it. I will test it myself. If it's not working properly, I will have Fred make sure on the back end of .loop that we get the box added so that it can be automatically prompted to the tenant to sign it, okay, or
Right.
check
It
it.
doesn't prompt them because they are able to finish the whole thing without checking any of those boxes.
Okay, thank you, Audrey, because I'm going to look into that and I will ask him to get that taken care of.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And in the meantime, until we get the back end of it straightened out, you can add a checkbox and then they will be prompted to sign that or check it off when they're filling and signing the rest of the form. Okay. But I'm going to try and get it work done really quickly. I'll take a look at it today. Okay. Let me see if
Thank
there's
you.
anything else. How much is the lead-based paint certification? Um, we do have some one or two inspectors that I know of, but the first thing you do is check with the town or have the landlord check with the town and see if the town is going to do the certification. And if they're going to do the certification, then that will be included in the cost of the certificate of occupancy or the smoke and fire inspection. Some towns have it set up, some towns don't. We do have one or two inspectors. I only know of one. So if anyone else knows of any lead-based paint certification people, please send me an email and we'll see if we could get that posted somewhere to movingwithfran@gmail.com. Okay. I've only had it done one time. I only did a rental probably when this first came out with the law, and it was $250 to do one floor. And then he said if the whole house is that to do the second floor of a house and to do the perimeter, because that's also they do the outside and inside. If it was the whole house, he would have done like for $400, but the first floor was not ready to be inspected. So that's kind of how it goes, right? So we'll try to get a list available. If I can try to get a list and add it to this slideshow before I send it out to anyone, I will. Okay. So just email me at movingwithfran@gmail.com if you want the copy of the slideshow. Thank you very much. And if we're done, have a great day. Bye bye.